when you're sitting there going, man, I just don't have that motivation. My brain isn't working today. I can't get my body up and running. I just can't. That's affecting your quality of life, and that's affecting your longevity too.
Your thyroid plays a significant role with metabolism. Read this as energy. It can impact your cardiovascular system. It can impact bone distance. And maybe most importantly, it can impact your mental health.
The endocrine system it's our metabolic regulator. So you have to think about the thyroid and your sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, insulin, and the control of your blood sugar is all involved in the endocrine system. When we look at the thyroid, that is the master. That's your master controller, your master regulator.
Our next speaker, Dr. Amie Hornaman, is known as the Thyroid Fixer. She's not your typical health expert. She's your guide to a vibrant, empowered life at the intersection of medicine and alternative health.
Those hormones that our body naturally produced in abundance as we were growing up and going through puberty in our 20s and our 30s, and then we hit 40 and we start to slow down production of those hormones, and those hormones start to drop. Hormones give us life. Hormones extend our longevity.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Dr. Hornaman, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to jump into this. This is an area I have shared quite openly that part of the reason I'm doing this summit is so that I get to educate myself and I get to ask experts like you so I can better understand the thyroid in this case, because I've had friends who have had thyroid challenges and I haven't really had them, so I haven't really dug into them. So I'm excited about jumping into this topic. Could you first give us a little background? How did you come to focus on the thyroid?
Well, Chris, like many of us in this space, it was a pain to purpose story. So we'll backtrack 20 plus years. I was competing in figure competitions. I was doing fitness modeling. And for those who don't know what that is, you have to diet down. You're eating chicken, broccoli, fish, asparagus. You're hitting the gym twice a day. And you're always checking in with a coach. So you have that coach that's doing your weigh-ins and tweaking your diet and getting you ready to step to the listeners. But it was a challenge that I really liked doing back in the day. And I had done so many. I was prepping for the scale kept going up. So I did my weigh-ins with the coach. I step on the scale. I see it go up 5 pounds, then 10, then 15. Once it hit 25 plus pounds, I stopped weighing because I'd really fallen into a depression. I was getting frustrated. I was doing a lot of self-blame. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not doing something right. Maybe I'm not working hard enough. Maybe I need to eat less and exercise more. And, I just felt like my body was rebelling against me. So I did what we all do. I went to my doctor and I was like, hey, doc, this is what's going on. Can you help me out here? And they ran some tests. He ran some tests at the time and came back and said, you're normal. Everything is fine. I didn't accept that. I knew that I wasn't. And that's a big message that I give to everyone is listen to your body, because your body will give you signs and signals when something is wrong with it. So I went to doctor number 2, who told me to eat less and exercise more. Doctor number 3 said it's all in your head. 4, 5, 6, they were all telling me the same thing, but I didn't give up because I knew that there was something going on. Doctor number 7 finally gave me the diagnosis. I had hypothyroidism. And I left her office and I was pumped up. I was like, yeah, I have a diagnosis now. I have a reason. I have an answer and I have a pill. And I gave it 5 months and not 1 pound was lost. I didn't feel any better. I didn't look differently in my clothes. Nothing. So again, I started doing my own research because you have to be your own patient advocate. And I found that she had placed me on T4 only, which we can certainly get into. And there was so much more to the thyroid. There were so many more hormones that the thyroid made. That's when I found functional medicine, because I thought, this doctor is only going to give me 1 pill. She's following the standard of care that she learned in med school. We need to break out of this. We need to think differently. And I kept hearing the name of a functional medicine practitioner. And so, I'm like, okay, the universe is giving me 3 signs now. I need to go. And he changed my life. He became my mentor. He fixed me. He listened to me. He put me on the right thyroid hormone replacement, the right supplements, the right nutrition plan, and just revamped my life, like literally gave it back to me. I don't know where I would be right now if it wasn't for him intervening at that time in my life. And that's really what changed my career path. I completely dropped everything I was doing. I thought, if I'm struggling with this in my 20s, if I'm struggling with this at a young age, how many more people are going through the same thing, getting misdiagnosed, getting blown off, and they're giving up?
All right. So that pain to purpose story is interesting and triggered a couple of things. One of them is I've been sharing with friends, and really anybody will listen, some concept that I have about success, that I think success is extremely boring, right? A lot of people maybe see you on stage or saw you on stage and saw you win, and then they don't realize how many times you ate chicken and like you were very specific. It was chicken and broccoli and fish, and I think there was one asparagus you said, right?
Right.
And how many times did you eat exactly the same thing? And even now in this new career, how many times have you told that story? And then how many times are you going to tell the story again? That there's a lot of boringness in real success. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
That's good. I like that so much. Oh my gosh, I never heard it put that way. But you know what? You're right. It unless you walk the walk, unless you walk in a person's shoes, you will never know the sweat, blood, and tears that accompanied and really fueled that person to whatever, like you said, the success is. So if it's winning an award, if it's hitting a marker in your own business, whatever it is, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get that person to where they're at.
And a lot of that is boring.
It is.
It's the same thing.
You don't care about that, right? Just tell me how to get me better, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. People just want to know what's in it for me. What do I do?
Exactly. And another thing that stood out for me, right, because the thyroid is involved, can generate some mental challenges. So you were talking about, not only are you doing the boring stuff of eating the chicken and the broccoli and the asparagus and the fish and your weight's going up, but that would be depressing in and of itself. But to also throw in the fact that the thyroid is managing some of that depression. So now, like, that must have been really a rough time, like had to be a really rough time.
It was. And to be so young and feel that way too, looking back, I feel like I actually missed out on that year. And thank God it was only a year that it took me going through all those doctors and getting the misdiagnosis and mistreatment. But I hear that so often from my patients too, that they feel like they've wasted a lot of time, and then they start to take on that mental, I don't want to call it mental issue, but that depression. They take it on as a new persona because it becomes their new norm. Yeah.
No, really rough. All right. So the thyroid is part of the endocrine system. Mm-hmm. Kind of fill us in. What is the endocrine system? How important of a role does it play? I know it's massive, but give us some perspective there. And then how does the thyroid fit into that endocrine system?
Okay. So the endocrine system is our metabolic regulator. So you have to think about the thyroid and your sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, insulin, and the control of your blood sugar is all involved in the endocrine system. When we look at the thyroid, that is the master. That's your master controller, your master regulator. And that is literally, the thyroid gland is determining how much fat you burn. How do you feel in a day? It determines whether you poop or not every single day. It determines whether your brain is going to function, whether your hair grows or not. So all metabolic, quote unquote, all metabolic processes. And I mean, outside of just when we think metabolism, we think fat burning. Yes, 100% that. And everything else I just mentioned, driven by the thyroid gland. So when the thyroid is not working properly, we'll call it hypo, low and slow, all of those systems start to slow down. So metabolism, boom, slows down to a halt. That's why you're gaining weight and not losing. Your GI tract slows down. That's why you can't go to the bathroom every day. Everything slows. Brain function slows. Mood, think of it going low and slow. So you get depressed. You can't think. You're tired all the time. ATP production at the mitochondrial level, not working right. So everything slows down and you become just this hypo, low and slow person. And that's the importance of the thyroid gland. It's running your entire body.
You mentioned weight gain, right? And like that was a key kind of indicator that something was not working right. Do you have any idea to what degree the thyroid issues are the cause of the weight issues that so many people experience?
Whenever I talk about weight, whether it's gaining weight or the inability to lose weight, I always focus on three things: thyroid, your testosterone levels, and whether or not you're insulin resistant, because those are really the three hormones. Now, we can argue all day long that what about the adrenals and what about estrogen and what about, correct. Everything, the whole endocrine system comes into play when we're talking about weight. But if you really focus on those major players, the thyroid, testosterone, and insulin, and the thyroid is at the top. So if you focus on testosterone, like we have these testosterone clinics popping up left and right, you go in, you get your testosterone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Because again, if the thyroid is off, you're not going to get the results that you want. And then the thyroid controls insulin secretion. It controls whether or not you're insulin resistant and whether your blood sugar is balanced. Again, thyroid off, no control over insulin. So now you're insulin resistant trying to lose weight. That's not going to work. So that's why I always focus on the thyroid first. And then we look at everything else below that. We look at everything the thyroid gland controls and we address all of those factors at the same time. But you can't do all of the factors without going back to the thyroid.
To the master controller. So what role do you think the thyroid or hypothyroidism plays in relation to longevity, right? So this is a longevity summit. Like, what is the role there?
Okay, so we can tie this in so many different areas, but I'm going to give the broad picture. So we said the thyroid is the master controller of your metabolism. If we think about longevity, the diseases that hinder our longevity, and when we talk about these diseases, yes, they will take you out of this world sooner. They will also decrease your quality of life. So when we say longevity, we have to look at how long you live in and how well you live in. Are you loving your life as you're getting older? And those two factors are very, very important. So when we're looking at the thyroid being off, we can easily say, okay, we know that excess weight and or obesity brings on diseases of aging so much faster, from cancer to diabetes to Alzheimer's. Now we know that Alzheimer's is deemed type 3 diabetes, tied to those high insulin levels, which come from weight gain, which again, like we mentioned before, can be tied back to the thyroid. So when the thyroid gland isn't working, you're going to put on weight, just like we talked about, and all those diseases of weight gain and obesity you're just more prone to those. Then on top of that, we had that mitochondrial function. So at the mitochondrial level, your mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, produces ATP. That runs your body through the day. So think about, your average day. You wake up, you have to do this, you have to do that. You got to go to work. You got to take the kids to school. You got to run to the grocery store. You're doing all of these things kind of on autopilot, not realizing that your body's being fueled. Let's say you throw in a workout. Let's say you build a presentation that you need to get done for your job. All of those tasks require ATP production. When that goes down, everything slows down. So when you're sitting there going, man, I just don't have that motivation. My brain isn't working today. I can't get my body up and running. I just can't. That's affecting your quality of life. And you bet your butt that's affecting your longevity too. So ATP production slows. Now we have that correlation. We can also tie back, like I mentioned earlier, with the whole endocrine system. We can tie the thyroid gland back to sex hormone balance. Again, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, and both males and females have all three. So ladies, don't think that you just have estrogen. You have testosterone too, and it's very, very important. It's important for both sexes. Those hormones that our body naturally produced in abundance as we were growing up and going to puberty in our 20s and our 30s. And then we hit 40 and we start to slow down production of those hormones, and those hormones start to drop. Hormones give us life. Hormones extend our longevity. So when we're talking about the thyroid gland controlling hormone production, I often see low and slow thyroids accompanied by abnormally low hormone levels at a younger age. So while a person would normally start transitioning through, we'll take a woman transitioning through perimenopause and menopause, and we know her estrogen starts to drop, and then progesterone and testosterone start to drop. All of a sudden, that's starting to happen in a woman's late 20s, 30s, mid 30s. And we're seeing these really low hormone levels, which absolutely will advance and will shorten longevity and advance aging. So it's going to, again, bring on those diseases of aging that are so correlated to proper hormone balance. And when we address the thyroid, we automatically start helping those sex hormones be at a more optimal level. Now, I'm not saying that you can go until you're 80 without replacing some of those hormones. I'm a huge fan, of bioidentical hormone replacement. So whether we're talking about thyroid hormone or we're talking about testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, I am a huge fan of bioidentical hormone replacement because hormones give us life. But again, even if you say like, oh, I'm not quite ready to dive into that realm yet, at least stay with me with the thyroid, because fixing that and optimizing your thyroid will naturally help the sex hormones too. And that will extend longevity and help you prevent those diseases associated with aging.
So, okay, great. That was a great rundown. So the thyroid is impacting hormones, right? Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. What's the other one? I'm just totally slipped my brain.
Progesterone. You guys have it too. It's not just a female hormone. You guys have progesterone as well, because progesterone kind of stills you out.
So, and maybe we need more of that, just everywhere. Maybe as you're getting onto social media, they should hand out progesterone so that like everyone's a lot more chill. And then weight, right? So obviously these have deleterious effects on longevity. And then if you think about the impact of depression or just being more depressive, then, you know, having a purpose to live, if you look at the blue zone people, one of the things that they talk about, those are the groups of people around the world who tend to live longer. One of the things that they have is a happy, existence. Like they have a purpose and they have, a peer group that they can connect with. And so all of those things clearly lead to not good impacts. You are enjoying, well, at least I hope you're enjoying the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, and make sure you share. But don't be that annoying guy, whatever you do. Don't share it with people who aren't actually interested in living beyond the norms. So talk a little bit about the thyroid-insulin connection, because we're all familiar with insulin and its impact on diabetes, and you went through like 1, 2, and 3. Talk a little bit about its connection with insulin, please.
Right. So the thyroid gland, again, master gland. What it does is it starts to make our insulin signaling and our glucose regulation, your blood sugar regulation, a little bit wonky. What happens anytime that we eat anything, short of just eating like a pound of lard? If you eat protein, if you eat a little bit of carbs, if you eat even a little bit of fat mixed with your protein and carbs, you get an insulin response from your pancreas. So your pancreas is going to secrete insulin in order to bring down your blood glucose. If you're wearing a CGM and you look and you're like, oh, my glucose went to 180 because I ate Girl Scout cookies, your pancreas responds to that and it pushes out insulin in order to bring down that glucose and to shuttle nutrients into your cells. The problem with insulin is that it's kind of like, I call it the Jekyll and Hyde hormone. We need it for life. You can't go without it. That's why type 1 diabetics have insulin pumps. Like they're going to die without insulin. You would die without insulin, but you don't want too much of it. When it's in excess, it becomes the fat storage hormone. And that's where, you know, that Jekyll and Hyde thing comes on. It's like, oh, we don't want it just storing fat all day. That's not cool. And then it also creates plaque in the brain. So I mentioned Alzheimer's before, and I saw my grandpa and I saw my mom go through Alzheimer's, and it's horrible. It's a horrible disease. If you ever see anyone go through it or you experience it in your family, I am sorry. It's just horrible. Well, let's prevent that. The things that we can do to prevent that, keep your insulin low. So insulin is highly inflammatory. causes plaque in the brain, causes that brain degeneration. So any of those diseases of aging that affect the brain, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, we know are tied back to having high insulin levels. Inflammation, brain diseases, and then the weight. So with the weight comes the excess weight on your body, the increased risk of cancer, the increased risk of cardiovascular disease. I mean, all the things that are correlated with excess weight come with high insulin levels. So when we control the thyroid, when we optimize the thyroid, we have better control over our insulin and our glucose. And that's going to help us prevent as much as we can. That's going to be another layer of prevention of those diseases of aging associated with high insulin.
Okay. All right. So I think we've painted the appropriate picture, not inappropriate functioning or thyroid. Bad. So what are the solutions? And I know you mentioned that the first thing they put you on was T4, and that wasn't the solution in your case. I assume that it's probably the solution in a lot of cases, right? Because if it's the standard of care, maybe that is the solution. But what are kind of lay out the options in terms of solutions for a dysfunctional thyroid?
So I'm not opposed to medication. I'm a huge fan of it. And when we talk about thyroid medication, I want to clarify, because I get a lot of patients that come in and they say, I just don't want to be on medication, air quotes there. Here's the thing. When we're replacing hormones that are no longer being properly made by your body, you kind of have to put those in a different category. So in the category of medication that I don't want to be on the rest of my life, that's where you put the Band-Aid meds. That's where everyone gets, the antidepressant because they're depressed. I was offered an antidepressant as well. You get the sleeping pills and the high blood pressure meds and the statins and all of those medications that you're like, man, do I really need that? It comes with a lot of side effects. I don't want to be on that the rest of my life. I get that. And I agree with you. Over here, we have hormone replacement. Now, is it a prescription that has to be picked up at a pharmacy? Yes. But it's hormone replacement. So you have to kind of separate those two. In that category of hormone replacement for the thyroid, we know the thyroid gland produces 4 thyroid hormones, T1, 2, 3, and 4. The prescribed versions are T3 and T4, or any combination of. So some patients will get T3 only. Some patients will get natural desiccated thyroid, like in the form of Armour or NP thyroid. That's a dried out thyroid gland from a pig. And yes, it contains T3 and T4. Some people will get a combination of T3 and T4 separately, and we adjust their doses that way. But here's the stat that is very, very interesting. Only 2% of the population that has hypothyroidism does well on the standard of care T4 only. 98% do their best and thrive on a blend of T4 and T3 that is customized to them and their numbers and their symptoms. So that's the important part when you are addressing thyroid function. You can't just go into your doc and be like, hey, doc, like I did. Hey, doc, I think there's some things wrong with me here. Can you test my thyroid? And can we do something about this? Oh, yeah, you're going to get a test. You're going to get one test. You're going to get one pill. And then you're going to leave. And I mean, hey, if you're in that 2% that do well on T4 only, good for you. You're probably not listening to this. If you're in the rest of the boat, the 98%, we need to change some things up. We might need to add in some T3 and get that T3, T4 balance. And here's the why. Because I said earlier, your thyroid gland produces 4 thyroid hormones. Why would we replace it with just one? It actually doesn't even make sense. I mean, when you just say it out loud, it doesn't make sense. Why don't we use a combination of what that thyroid gland actually was put in us to do? It produces more than one thyroid hormone. So that really is how I like to tackle thyroid cases. Now, if someone is really on the border and we just think, this thyroid gland, if we could just boost it a little bit, if we could love on it and make it work to its potential, we can do that without thyroid hormone replacement. We can use a variety of different lifestyle changes. We can use supplements. We can use mineral support. We can use bioregulators and peptides. But I would say that's a small percentage of the people that come to me. Usually the people that come to me are so far down the hole of symptoms that we have to move into that replacement.
Okay, so you really focused on T3 and T4. You've got T1, 2, 3, and 4, and those are just thyroid hormones. The medical community got extremely creative. The thyroid produces thyroid hormones. They didn't decide to give them different names. Talk about maybe the differences in T1, T2, T3, T4, and where the best effects happen.
Right. So that's perfect to better understand this. I'm going to work backwards. T4 that we've already talked about is inactive. And that's the thing to remember. It has to be converted over to T3. So one of its iodine molecules that's attached to it needs to be released, and it needs to become T3 in order to attach to the receptor site on the cell. So every single cell in your body has a little receptor site on it for T3, not T4. So T4 has to go through that transformation and become T3 in order for it to be active. When we look at the two other thyroid hormones, T1 and T2, kind of similar. T1 is inactive. T2 is actually very active. So as we dive into the studies and the research on T2, it's fascinating because it's not available in prescription form. We can only get it supplementally, which is kind of good for us because then that way we don't have to rely on our doctor to write the right thing. And it's fascinating because the human studies, the human trials on it are showing a significant increase in basal metabolic rate, showing an increase in ATP production at the mitochondrial level. And it's all without an effect on your cardiovascular system, without an effect on the thyroid. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say you go to your doctor and you convince him or her to give you, and you have a thyroid problem, and you're like, hey, I listened to this lady on this show here, and I learned that this T4 that I'm on is totally inactive. How about giving me some T3, doc? And your doctor agrees. So you get the T3, you're taking it with your T4, and you feel better. But then all of a sudden, you're like, my heart rate is racing a little bit. You look down at your little Apple Watch, and you're seeing, my goodness, it's like 120. I feel like I'm doing cardio while sitting here. Or your doctor tests your thyroid and goes, hey, you look kind of hyper. Now think of hyper as exactly what it sounds. You're amped up. Your heart rate's up. Your blood pressure is up. Your temperature is up. We don't want you to go over there into that world. We want you to stay in the middle zone, like nice and optimal. So your doctor looks at your labs and goes, oh my gosh, you're hyper. Let's drop some of your medication. T2 does none of that. It will not increase your heart rate. It will not have a cardiovascular effect. It will not make you look like you all of a sudden became hyperthyroid, or it won't push you into hyperthyroid where you get anxious and jittery. And that's the fascinating world that we're finding now, diving into this other thyroid hormone. It has a lot of potential on the body for people who maybe they're in the conventional system and they can't get past that sixth doctor that says, no, there's nothing wrong with you, but here's some T4, or the one that you get the diagnosis. Hey, you have hypothyroidism. Here's some T4. We can now add in T2, and that can really help with symptoms and quality of life. But that's the breakdown of all the different thyroid hormones.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got clarity on that. You've got the inactives on either end, the 1 and the 4, the actives in the middle, 2 and 3. Are there, other than just replacing those, are there other solutions, other things that can be done to really address kind of hyper or hypothyroidism?
There are. So I mentioned earlier, like if you're on that cusp where, maybe we can catch you in that state where we just have to love on your thyroid. We just have to make it work better. We have to give it what it needs to work better. We can do things like the bioregulators and peptides that are out now. The bioregulators are really fascinating. When you go down that rabbit hole, the thyroid bioregulator called thyrogen will help to balance the thyroid, whether you're hyper or hypo. So it actually brings it back into homeostasis, which is what a lot of the bioregulators do with the body, is they bring that gland, that organ, that system back into homeostasis. And then things like the support of nutrients. I'm a huge fan of iodine. I think iodine is absolutely vital for the function of your thyroid gland. It helps your T4, the inactive, convert over to T3 and become active. It helps with symptoms as well. So I have a lot of patients that experience hair loss because of their thyroid being low. I have patients that experience the fatigue, like we talked about, the low ATP production. Iodine will help with that. Selenium will help with that. Magnesium. So when we bring in those beautiful minerals and those beautiful nutrients, the thyroid gland can just work better.
So I'm hearing, as is so often true, that it's a more holistic perspective, right? That can get you the best results.
I like combining it. Yes. I mean, I like combining still that, I will call it Western medicine. We'll take the thyroid hormones, thank you, from big pharma, from the pharmaceutical companies, even the natural desiccated thyroid hormone, the Armour and the NP, made by a pharmaceutical company. So I will take that and use that while incorporating in that holistic approach as well. So it's doing things at the same time. Now, again, if I have someone that's just like, I do not want a prescription. I don't want anything that I have to pick up from the pharmacy. We have the bioregulators. We have glandulars. So thyroid glandular in supplement form is actually just dried bovine thyroid glands. So just like we're using the dried porcine thyroid gland for Armour and NP thyroid, the natural desiccated thyroid meds, we can use thyroid glandular over the counter supplemental form, and it's dried cow thyroid. So you're getting kind of the similar effect from that. And then when you add in everything else that we talked about, maybe you toss in the bioregulators, maybe you toss in peptides. And then I would also say, let's focus on your insulin. I'm going to bring that back into the conversation because high insulin levels will actually stop conversion of T4 to T3. It will create inflammation in your body. And we know that inflammation is a very fast track to decreasing your longevity, fast track to aging, fast track to decreasing your quality of life. So that high insulin also contributes to low thyroid function. So it's kind of like that back and forth where thyroid gland controls insulin, but high insulin, thyroid gland's not going to be happy. T4 isn't going to convert to T3. You're going to be a walking ball of inflammation. If you're sitting there with an autoimmune condition ready to happen, that switch is going to turn on too. So controlling that insulin by eating real foods, by not jacking up your blood sugar, eating processed standard American diet foods, high carb, high sugar, that will also help. And that's something that we can all do. So yes, to answer your question, Chris, there's a whole bunch of natural, holistic ways that we can approach this. And then sometimes we need to bring in the thyroid hormone replacement too.
Excellent. Right. So I think that's going to be one of the overriding themes of this longevity summit is that it's the holistic approach. That's the right thing. So in one of your talks that I was watching, you mentioned kind of wrestling with PCOS. And I was just wondering, did your work on your thyroid really resolve that? Are those intertwined in some way that I wasn't previously aware?
I do see PCOS tied to hypothyroidism quite often in the female population of my patients. For myself, my PCOS was diagnosed after. So I was diagnosed with the hypothyroidism first, and then years later, even when my thyroid was optimized, the PCOS showed up. So it's kind of hard to say, which came first, chicken or the egg. Was it just kind of sitting there waiting to happen? But again, we know that PCOS is tied to insulin dysregulation. So a lot of times we'll see hormone levels being really wonky. That progesterone drops. A woman can go estrogen dominant. She can sometimes become androgen dominant. So the DHEA and the testosterone go sky high. And that's where she'll get the facial hair and the acne. I didn't have the androgen part. I just had the severe insulin resistant component and the low progesterone component that threw off my cycles. It caused acne. It caused weight gain. So the two go hand in hand. But again, we're coming back to what we just said. If you control the insulin, and you can do that with controlling your food, with exercise, with using natural solutions like berberine or inositol, when you control that insulin, then all of a sudden everything else starts to balance out. Hormones even start to balance out more. That's why we'll use berberine and or metformin for the treatment of PCOS, because what does that do? Brings down insulin and glucose. And that in turn helps to regulate hormone function as well. So yeah, PCOS very much tied to hypothyroidism.
All right. So we're coming to the end. I've got a couple standard questions. This is a longevity summit. So I've got to ask, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I do, because I've thought about this already. I want to live to 95, but I want to kick ass all the way to 95. So I want to look good. I want to feel good. I want to perform good. And I want to be just like those blue zone people, right? They're playing sports. They're out there. I don't care if it's pickleball or somebody skiing down a mountain. That's going to be me. I want to be on the snowboard, going down a mountain at the age of 90, 92. Maybe I'll slow down at 93 and get ready for 95. But no, I want to kick ass all the way to the end.
I like it. Yeah. Like very specific 95 and kick ass up to the end. How long do you think humans can live, right? So you read like Dr. David Sinclair, lifespan, potentially forever. Dave Asprey is saying 180 is his target. What's your kind of opinion on that?
I do believe that we have the potential. I think we have the potential to live to 120, 150. I don't know. Dave might be pushing it at 180, but who knows? Who knows? I could be horribly wrong. But the human potential of the human body is fascinating. And I think it's something that we don't even know. Like we can't even scratch the surface of what our bodies could do if we remove all of the things in our body, the toxins that we're exposed to. And I know you got into this with other guests, but just cresting over it, the toxin exposure, again, the endocrine dysregulation. I see that in my world from the exposure to plastics and toxins and xenoestrogens and all the things that shut down your body. Why are we seeing increased risk of cancer now? Rates of cancer? Why are we seeing increased rates of autism and Alzheimer's? All of the things. It's what we're exposed to in our world, but our bodies have the potential to push past that, to push past the cap that we have right now and really go into the 100s very easily.
I like that. So yeah, maybe it is limitless, but we have to solve the problems that we're creating for ourselves.
Right.
All right. So I want to ask you 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets. Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts. To longevity and a long health span that you can share. Okay.
So we talked about it earlier, controlling for insulin. I'm going to go back to that all day long. Even though I am the thyroid fixer, when we're talking about longevity, I'm going to hang my hat more on the insulin component for overall. When you control for insulin, when you stop eating the processed foods, when you eat real foods, now I'm not even talking about going low carb because we hear, well, you control insulin and lower your glucose by going low carb. You don't even have to go low carb if you're eating real foods. Again, going back to your point, Chris, when you look at those blue zones, they're eating sweet potatoes and vegetables and fruit and organic meat that's just, it's from the cows that are grazing in the field next door, right? When we consume real food, our bodies love us for it and our bodies work how they were created to work in the proper way. And that's not with insulin resistance. That's not with hormone dysregulation. That's not with a thyroid problem and a ton of autoimmune conditions and cancer. They work in just a beautiful, flowing way where our insulin does what it's supposed to do. It gives us life, lowers our glucose, and pushes nutrients into the cell. It doesn't become that Jekyll and Hyde hormone of storing fat and causing inflammation and causing brain plaque and diseases. Controlling for insulin and eating real food is huge. Now, I know people out there are going to be like, well, I need the convenience. I need the quick grab and go. I'm going all day. I'm working. Well, maybe that's another problem. Maybe that should be number 2 is you need to prioritize your life. When we are running our bodies into the ground, cortisol is produced. And again, that's a whole other topic, adrenals, cortisol, thyroid connection. You produce that cortisol from high stress, from going at a rapid pace. And believe me, I am guilty of this. I am not speaking from a pedestal. I am 100%. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a type A, you are guilty of this. You run yourself into the ground. You work too hard. You do too much. There's too much on your schedule. Now you can't even prioritize what goes into your mouth. And now you start making excuses and you're grabbing this convenient food and you've lost control of your own body and of your own world and what goes into you. So slowing down, controlling for stress, lowering that cortisol, because cortisol will push up your glucose too and make you insulin resistant. Controlling for stress and taking time and really prioritizing your life. And I'm not saying that you have to meditate for an hour. I just mean get some kind of self-care regimen going, whether it's a 5-minute meditation followed by a 30-minute heavy weight training session, because that's your jam. You have to do that and block out that time to do that self-care 100%. Number 3, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm going to go with LHS. You got to lift heavy stuff. Because when we're talking about longevity overall, and again, when you look at those blue zones, I'm going to go back to that now that you mentioned it. Those people are getting up and down off the floor. They're picking up stuff. They're doing manual labor into their 90s and 100s. And we have 40-year-olds that can't even bend down and pick something up off the ground. The bodies are weak. We're seeing osteoporosis at 40 and 50 years old. I mean, come on. We need to lift heavy because that muscle on your body that grows in response to resistance training. So when I say LHS, I mean, go lift heavy stuff, pick up weights, do functional movements, get up and down off the ground, do a push-up, do an air squat, because that's your own body weight, actually. So if you're walking around 150 pounds and you're doing an air squat, you're doing 150 pounds. And if you're doing a push-up, you're doing 150 pounds of resistance. So do that resistant movement to keep that muscle on. It protects your musculoskeletal system, protects your bones, it protects your body from aging, and it allows you to be active into those latter years. Without muscle, that's where we see the broken hips and the knee replacements and the hip replacements and just that weak stature where you're hunched over, you're bent over, you're walking, you're trying to get through your day. You have no strength. You have no energy. And muscle is a huge organ. It helps us have energy and motivation and drive and strength and body protection. So I would say that would be my number 3 is go LHS a little bit.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And Dr. Amie, how can people contact you?
Yeah. So, okay, you can go to my website at dramiehornaman.com. If you're interested in working together, you can certainly book an application call. But if you just want to hear me talk a little bit more, like Chris said in the beginning, you can go to the Thyroid Fixer podcast. That's on all podcast platforms. And if you're like, I'm not really sure what's going on with me yet. I have some of these symptoms, but I don't know. You can jump into my Girl Fix Your Thyroid Facebook group, and in there you can actually post your labs. I am in there answering your questions. You can say, hey, this is going on with me. I don't know what's going on. What should I do? So you can post your question in there. You can post your labs in there, and I will be in there answering you to guide you along this journey.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm excited about the rise of peptides and bioregulators for anti-aging. We've seen a lot. We've seen a lot in the last couple of years, a lot of influencers, a lot of big name people talking about these. And I've even dove into the research myself. I've been using them myself. I think that they're the next thing in health overall. We're already seeing pharmaceutical companies, whether this is good or bad, we're already seeing pharmaceutical companies pull in peptides and starting to say, with the tirzepatide, the semaglutide, hey, these things are effective. Yes, they are. They hold huge promise in longevity and health span, in prevention. And I think as peptides become more mainstream, God forbid they don't get shut down, right? Hopefully the pharmaceutical companies will at least see the potential in these amino acid chains that are so powerful. I think they really are the up and coming answer to a variety of different diseases. And even if they stay in our world, in the biohacking world, so be it. We can help so many people with the rise of peptides. So I think that that's really the next big thing that I'm excited about.
Awesome. Excited about it too. The topic keeps coming up again and again. All right. So you can reach her at dramiehornaman.com. You can find her on the podcast, The Thyroid Fixer. And then if you're on Facebook, you can go find her group, Girl Fix Your Thyroid. Dr. Hornaman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.